We want to thank you guys for joining us on our last one today. We are on step 8. And what this whole series has been about is being able to recognize progressive district attorneys, being able to recognize what it looks like when folks are working for the community, working with community, and really doing the best work they can in the position that they're in. And today I have somebody awesome with me, District Attorney John Hummel. Tell us a little about yourself.
Julianne, hey, glad to be with you today and with all your listeners and watchers. I'm the district attorney in Deschutes County. I was elected in 2014 and reelected about 4 years ago. I'm wrapping up my second term in office. I started my career way back in 1995 as a public defender. And I worked as a public defender for 6 years and then worked overseas in international development work and came back to Oregon and ran for district attorney, and I've been doing that for 8 years and have enjoyed the heck out of it.
Awesome. So I know you're not new to this language, but a lot of people are really only starting to talk about what a transformative DA might look like. But like you just said, you've been a DA in Deschutes County for almost 8 years. What led you to want to become a DA? And even more importantly, what led you to want to do it differently?
Well, yeah, I didn't want to be a DA. I started as a public defender. That's why I went to law school. It's kind of cool now to be a public defender. Back in the 90s, it wasn't. It was a job that most people didn't want. I wanted it. I wanted to, fight for, to make sure that everyone in this country received the fair shot, regardless of their status in our world. And so I worked as a public defender. And as I mentioned, then after 12 years of that, I worked overseas in Liberia, Africa. And then I came back and I was catching up with old friends in Bend, and we're sitting around having a beer. And one of them said, you should run for district attorney. And I laughed. I was like, well, no. First off, I'm not in criminal law anymore. At that point, I was in the healthcare policy law. But second, I said, even if I was in criminal law, I'm not the man. Like, I fight the man. Like, I was a public defender. I'm not the man. And but they pushed me hard over the next few weeks, and they said, hey, our current DA is a real son of a gun, and he's old school, lock him up, tough on crime. We could really use you. And so I was like, all right, let me think a little bit more about it. And I wrote down all the reasons I didn't want to be a DA. Well, after reading that, I still didn't want to do it. But I said, okay, I should now write a list of the reasons I would want to be a DA. So I wrote that list down. And at the end of it, after that took like a week or so, after doing that, I looked at that sheet of paper and I said to myself, oh, I want to do that. I mean, that was the job description to be the type of DA I wanted to be. Now, I didn't know any DA like that. And what was on that list was, I was saying, we need to make our community safe by addressing the root causes of crime. Let's work on mental health issues, addiction issues, housing issues, poverty issues, education issues, transportation issues, all the drivers of crime that DAs never work on, right? DAs too often view our job as to sit back in our cushy offices, wait for crime to occur, and then punish harshly the person who committed the crime. Well, that doesn't prevent crime. That's an action after a crime was committed. So I told my friends, I was like, look, I showed them the piece of paper. I'm like, I'm going to run for DA, but I'm going to run a campaign for this. And I said, I don't know if our community is ready for this. If our community wants a tough on crime DA, they got the incumbent. They can vote for him. If they want a new type of transformative DA, they can have me. Never will there have been like a more stark choice to the voters in Deschutes County than in that race. And I said, I don't know where our community is. I don't know if they're ready for a new type of DA. And I said, that's fine. I'm not going to run a tough on crime campaign and then get in there and do my progressive stuff. That's not fair. I'm going to tell the voters who I am and what I'm about. And just like the incumbent was going to tell the voters who he is and who he's about. And we'll see if where the voters were. And the voters in Deschutes County were ready for that change. They elected me by a pretty good margin, 60-40. And then I was reelected. So yeah, that's how I became DA.
That's awesome. So And I know we're seeing some of these races, start to come up. We've seen them with the last cycle, and we're definitely seeing them in 2022, where we have like these incumbents that are, they're running these tough on crime campaigns, and we have new folks coming in with new ideas and, new ways of doing things. So that's really interesting, and hopefully our other counties follow Deschutes' lead. But um, you have significant experience in conflict resolution, which, by the way, should absolutely be required of anyone in your position. But how does navigating conflicts around police accountability compare with the conflict resolution work that you've done internationally and also domestically?
Yeah, that's a real insightful question, and I appreciate it. I tell you this, if you're going to do transformative work as a DA or in any profession, but let's focus on district attorney work. If you're going to do it, oh boy, let me tell you, there's going to be conflict. Your life will not be pleasant. People will push back on you. I mean, the status quo is entrenched, and
Yes.
and they don't want change. And so I will go into rooms where people hate me. I will suggest policies that people hate, and they are nasty and vitriolic to me when explaining why they don't like it, like meaning screaming at me, yelling at me, nasty, awful things. And you kind of understand why people would not want to put themselves in that situation. Like they'll be, early on, there wasn't a day that went by that this didn't happen. But now it's like, there's probably not a week that goes by where I don't look at a situation, whatever it is, something's on my desk, and I analyze it. I ask questions, I do my research, and at the end of the day, I say, okay, if I do this, my phone is going to blow up. The tough on crime, contingent, the trade associations, police chief are going to blow up my phone and say nasty, terrible things. The media is going to blow me up. Social media is going to blow me up. And if I don't do it, things will be fine and I won't hear from anyone. And then I say, okay, is it the right thing to do it though? And if I say to myself, yes, well, then I do it. And you know what? All those bad things do happen. I do get blown up. My life's miserable for the next few months. And so you need to be comfortable being uncomfortable. You need to be comfortable being uncomfortable. I think most people are not comfortable being uncomfortable. That's human nature. You shouldn't be comfortable being uncomfortable, right? I may be the freak that is comfortable, but maybe it's from my training and experience, as you mentioned, over in Liberia. I worked for President Carter and the Carter Center in Liberia, helping Liberians recover from a brutal 15-year civil war. And I tell you, I lean back on that experience a lot. And when I'll say to myself, okay, if I enact this policy proposal that's gonna, get the tough on crime people all upset at me, guess what? They're gonna yell at me. My life will be fine. Liberians were dying in the streets defending their country. This ain't nothing compared to what they did. And if they did it, I can do it too. And so, I lean on my experience in conflict resolution and in war zones. You bet, and it helps. But you better be comfortable being uncomfortable doing this work, or you shouldn't do it.
Yeah. So you and I have actually had some awesome conversations about this, just in just in working in the same fields, right?
Yeah.
But how does the lack of accountability, in your experience, particularly harm Black, Brown, and other marginalized communities?
Yeah, right. So let's try this on for size, right? We know that people of color don't use drugs at a higher percentage than white people, but 90 some odd percent of the people charged with drug crimes are people of color. How is that? Why is that? We know that people of financial means do not commit crimes at a lower rate than people who don't have money. But we know that over 90% of the people in the criminal justice system, don't make a lot of money because they qualify for a public defender. Why is that? Well, because we know policing is focused on lower income people and people of color. And so when police are, less than ethical, their unethical actions will have a disproportionate impact on people of color and people of low income. Hey, when I was a public defender way back in Prineville, I went hard at the police. I fought for my clients. I would cross-examine police officers pretty harsh, but I also think I had a good relationship with the police there too. There was a kind of a mutual respect. And one officer that I had a pretty good relationship with, I was talking to him one day about a DUI enforcement. And I saw a lot of my farm worker clients who were picked up outside this one bar for drunk driving. And I knew that the police parked around the corner from that bar and stopped cars that drove away. And so I said to him, I was like, hey, officer, why do you park outside that bar? If you parked outside the Prineville Country Club on a sunny Saturday afternoon, those golfers coming off the course, they probably had, one too many gin and tonics. You'd get a lot of DUIs out of that. Why don't you park there? He goes, Hummel, I know where you're going. You're saying I'm focusing on brown people. I know where you're going. He goes, that's not why we target that bar. He goes, we target that bar based on data. If I look back in the last 10 years, 90% of our DUIs come out of that bar. And I'm like, because you target it. Like, it's like, my God. And so I think police would say, hey, look, we're only policing the low crime areas where there's people of color, the high crime areas where people of color live because there's high crime there. And I say, you have high crime there because you're policing it so much.
Right. Because you're looking for it in that community. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. And, why do you think it's so difficult? Because this is something I've always had a question around, right? Like, I am held to, as just a normal civilian woman, right? Like, I am held to a certain standard of behavior in my job, as a mother, as a parent. And why is it that law enforcement seems to not have the same level of accountability? And why is that difficult?
Yeah. Well, I mean, we could teach a course, a college or graduate level course on this. It's real complex, but to try to sum it up, it's because it's not one person you would ever be seeking to hold it accountable. It's the myth and the legend of law enforcement, right? Well, look, I respect law enforcement. I work with them. I and the good ones I think the world of, right? And so, like you, I sometimes wonder, why can't we ensure that the bad ones are held accountable? Well, there's this myth out there that's been created that police are like Captain America, right? That they're the only people between safety and mayhem. If there's not a police officer, there'll be carnage in the streets every minute. So if you, as a district attorney, go against a police officer, you are in essence for Antifa, for anarchy, for rape, for child sex abuse. Captain America is all that is protecting us from that. And how dare you go against Captain America, right? And I'm being somewhat facetious, but that is it's this myth that has been created through active lobbying, active messaging by police and their lobbyists for the last 100 years. And hey, kudos to their lobbyists. They've done a great job. The messaging and branding that police have done for themselves. You would think law enforcement is the most dangerous profession out there, right? They tell you that every day. Well, no, it's way down the list. Truck driving is the most dangerous profession. And police are, I think, 15th or 20th on the list. And actually, and most of their danger is in their driving, not the suspect who shoots them. Most officers who are injured in car crashes, with one exception. The last 2 years, most officers who've been injured or killed were from COVID. Second, most deaths are from car crashes. Third most deaths are from, guns from suspects. But again, they're not near the most dangerous profession in the country. So you're going against the myth. You're not going against one officer. That's why.
Yeah. And that's interesting that you say that, because I actually just looked that up while we were talking, and you're right. They're not even in the top 10 most dangerous positions. That's pretty wild. And I also think, we're looking at kind of like you said, it's not just one one person. It's like an entire system of these folks that, but we have data, right? We have data that shows that if we address the drivers of crime, that police are needed less and less. And we've seen in other countries where police officers aren't even armed, and their crime rates are lower than ours. And I think part of what's been going on lately, especially with this, again, this tough on crime approach that's coming out and being like pushed very hard, is like fear mongering. And so you nailed that. So thanks for bringing that up, because I think that's so important that people understand that, that, we often hear that police are like, we have to have more police because crime has gone up. Crime has gone up because people have been in their houses for 2 years and their mental health is wild.
Right,
And
exactly.
it's all over the country, right? Like,
Yeah.
it's not something that's unique to Portland. It's not something that's unique to our communities. It's actually something that's happening everywhere, and it's in response to a major event, right?
Right.
So I really like that you brought that up. But in your time as DA, how have you increased the expectation of accountability of law enforcement in Deschutes County? And how has this impacted communities within your county?
Well, I mean, I always am loath to speak for others, right? I think we'd want to ask
Sure.
law enforcement what they think about, Hummel ensuring accountability, but I'll give it a shot. I think law enforcement knows this about me. I will never treat a law enforcement officer any better than any other member of the public. I also won't treat them any worse, right? And I've met with cops a lot, as you can imagine, and we've had frank, direct conversations, and they know this about me. They know they get a fair shake with me. That Hummel is not looking to be a zealot who's out to get cops. I'm not out to get cops. But if the evidence is presented, to me, through my investigation that shows an officer has, misstepped ethically or violated the law, they also know that I will seek to hold them accountable. So there's I think maybe a mutual respect there, and that's how you have to do it. If you're coming in to a DA's office with the goal of taking down cops, well, one, that's inappropriate, right? Your goal has to be to follow the evidence wherever it may lead and not have a predetermined outcome. And so one, it's unethical as a DA to be out to get cops.
Sure.
Two, you're never going to be able to work with the police again if they think you're putting the finger on you're putting your finger on the scales of justice. Now, police, I'm not going to be naive and say they're a lover of DA Hummel, because again, they know I will hold them accountable if they've misstepped. But I think they at least respect me. They know that I'm not going to game the system to take them down. And so what's the downstream impact of that on communities of color? Again, I'm very loath to speak from others, but for others. But I would hope, let's say this, I would hope that, people, people who are leaders in communities of color, or any person who is, a person of color in Deschutes County, to the extent they know me, they would know that I have their back, that I see them, that I hear them, that I'm willing and able and actively seeking out to give them a voice in the system. I want to know about their lived experiences, and their lived experiences will influence the decisions I make, because I don't know what it's like to walk the streets of Bend as a Black man or a gay man or transgender or someone of Muslim faith. I don't know what that's like. So it's incumbent upon me to reach out to people who are different than me so I can learn about their lived experiences. So I would hope that people who are different than me in Deschutes County know that they have an ally in their DA.
Yeah, and I think in our last episode of this, one of the things I always ask people, if you had one thing you could tell a DA or a potential DA, what would it be? And theirs was to make sure that when they're talking to people, they have context, right? When we're looking at, so many people meet at the intersectionality of criminality and victimization. That it's so important to not sweep those things under the rug and to really make sense of why someone could have or would have done whatever it is that they did, and make sure that the approach is appropriate. So I really appreciate you saying that. Um, and then one thing, this is our last question before the last question, but how have communities of color and other marginalized folks, how have their leaders been able to push for policies that meaningfully promote police accountability?
Yeah, I can tell you after immediately after George Floyd was murdered, I I well, it was, I think I've been working on criminal justice reform my entire career, and it was hard to get people to pay attention. It wasn't on anyone's radar, right? In Bend, we were talking about affordable housing and the environment and public transit and education, all important issues. But a criminal justice reform wasn't in the public conversation. So I was working on it, and I felt no one cared, right? And then on day one, after George Floyd was murdered, then hundreds, if not thousands of eyes in our community were at me, and they were challenging me because, well, I'm a white male leader of a criminal justice system. So people are saying, why aren't you doing more? And it was hard for the first month because I was responding with, I've been doing stuff for the past 6 months, 6 years. You're not listening. You don't care. And I was in this like fight. And finally, I had this moment where I was like, wait, it doesn't matter what I've done before. Now, today, there are groups, young activists of color in Deschutes County who are coming to me saying they want to do something with me. Now, they might be saying it vitriolically. They might also be saying, we want you to do something because you haven't done something before. And why do I focus on the noise or what they said before? Why don't I say, you want to do something going forward? Let's do it together. And when I got to that point, it was real productive because these young leaders were showing me the way. They were helping me do more than I would have been able to do on my own. Like, look, my arm was getting tired from patting myself on the back in the past. I thought I did some good things, and I think we did. But even then, when I was doing good things, I had checked myself a bit. I was like, I'm going to do this. I really want to do this big, bold thing, but I think that's too much. I don't think my community will take it. I can't do it. So I was doing incremental work, right? These young leaders were saying, no more incremental stuff. Let's go there. And I'm like, all right, we'll go there, but you got to help me get there. We got to do this together. I need to show that the community is behind me. So they helped me do bigger things that I, honestly was probably reluctant to do without them. And so they showed me the way. They showed me the courageous voice that maybe I thought I had, but when they were saying what they wanted to do, and I was like, wow, that would take a real courageous voice to do it. And I guess I had it in me, but only with them, right? So together we could do more than we could have done alone. And so that's what they did for our community.
And one of the things, and I won't get too deep into it, but you guys had a situation out in Bend that was, it was pretty significant. And I think a lot of the community was in an uproar. A lot of the community had a certain viewpoint of the case. And one of the things, and I'll just say, because I have always been, I hate to say it, but I'm not anti, well, yes, I am. I've always been kind of ACAB, but for me, what I really appreciated about you is when I asked and I said, hey, can you just actually sit down and talk to me about this? There was no hesitation at all. It was come down and let's talk about it. And then through kind of, having that conversation and opening that door, I was kind of able to understand some of the limitations that you all have. I think there's even progressive folks, even folks that are doing this work out of the best space, they also have limitations. And through those conversations, we're able to kind of take a peek at what needs to be changed. Yep. We're kind of able to look at, okay, well, this doesn't offer these protections to these folks. And this doesn't offer, and I would do this, but I can't do this. And so that conversation, I really appreciated that conversation. And it's something that that experience I've taken with me quite often because, it's from a community leader standpoint, it's real easy for me to look at situations and just feel how I feel, right?
Yeah.
And especially as a Black woman, as somebody who's been a victim of crime, and I've been on the other side of that. And so, but having that conversation with you really kind of opened my eyes to why legislative policy is so important, and why changing it is so important and reform is so important. Because sometimes, even if you want to do the right thing, even if there's certain caveats to a case that you really want to explore, you can't. Your hands are tied. And the fact that you were still willing to answer every email that was coming from community, even though they're hollering and screaming, and that was something that really stood out to me. So I really appreciate you taking the time to have that conversation with me, because it really moved a needle for me as well, where I just kind of was like, oh, I get it now. This is why reform is important. This is why we have to be transformative. This is why we have to cross the T's and dot the I's, because it's these little lines in an ORS somewhere, or this little thing that can sometimes prevent justice for everybody involved. So thank you for that. And then my last question, and I ask this of everyone, but it's kind of weird because you are one. But so I'll ask it like this. If you could give a piece of advice to any incoming progressive DA, anyone who's thinking about running, that has a different mindset, a transformative mindset, what would it be?
Well, I give this advice I get asked this a lot, right? And not just for people who are becoming a new DA, but for people who are going into elected office and other positions too. And it's something that I did, and it's made all the difference. And that is, do not read media accounts about yourself or your office. And here's how this happened. During my campaign, it was pretty heated. And I was reading the newspaper articles every day. And I would get so spun up. I'd be talking to my campaign manager. Can you see what they're saying about me? That's nuts. That's ridiculous. And I would go down this spiral. And I was doing that for months. And that was distracting me from executing my campaign plan. And she finally said to me one day, she goes, look, we have a plan. We believe that if you do everything on this campaign plan, you will win. By reading those newspaper articles, you're getting messed up in the head and you're getting distracted. Stop reading them. Well, I went cold turkey on that. I did not read any media accounts or social media accounts on me. We just ran the campaign and we won. And so I started doing that in office too. And I'll tell you what, the first year in office, my staff didn't get it. Like, they would run into my office all the time, like, did you see this article about what they said, what we're doing? That's crazy. I'm like, and they would rant for 30 seconds and I'd be like, no, I didn't see it. They're like, oh, I'll get you a copy. You must have not seen it. It's like, oh, no, I don't need to see a copy. I'm not reading it. Like, you don't want to know? I'm like, no, I don't. They're like, why? Because if I did, I'd be like you right now. And what am I doing? I'm working on the things I need to do. What are you doing? You're getting freaked out about what the media says. So what I do every day, as I kind of intimated earlier, I ask myself, what's the right thing to do? And I do it. And I don't worry about what the media says. Now, I'll still get the incoming phone calls and emails from people who are upset about me, but at least I've taken away the media account. The media can't make me read what they write. They can write it. Now, if someone calls me, I answer every phone call. So my advice would be, don't follow the media. Follow what's in your heart. Follow what you know is right. Do it, and damn the consequences, damn the torpedoes, they say, right?
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I've appreciated our conversation. I thank you for joining us, and thank you again for standing with Safety and Justice Oregon on so many other things. And I will talk to you soon.
All right. Thanks. See ya.